Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Ennis Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 23rd of September 2024. Let's get straight to where we normally start. Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to the video below. Another heavy day of losses for the Russians, 1,330. So over that imaginary range, well, it's not an imaginary range, it's kind of an arbitrary range that I have suggested, the sort of 1,000 to 1,300 range that we've seen over the last 6 months, and we've had now 3 days of over 1,300, getting really high yesterday to 1,500, dropping back to what is still over that, the top end of that range. So this is a significant day of personnel losses for the Russians. 16 tanks is almost double the daily average. So another heavy day of losses in that category, day of heavy losses. 30 troop carrying AFVs is a pretty significant number. And then we get a record breaking number in the artillery category, artillery systems, 81 lost over the last 24 hours, as according to Ukrainian General Staff. And of course, you can question those numbers, but even if you took, say, a massive 15% off that, say they're lying or over exaggerating or whatever to 15%, that is still a huge number of losses. Like, there's no two ways of looking at this. Something bad has happened to Russian artillery systems in the last 24 hours. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, and another huge number in this category, vehicles and fuel tanks, 79. 1 piece of special equipment, very low there. So let's go and look at the Dell stats, the Ukrainian General Staff figures, as they are updated every day to this Excel spreadsheet that you can find in the description to the video below as well. Thank you, Dell, for doing this. So we can see when the colors are dark, the darker red they are, the worse it is for the Russians in terms of the range. Personnel being lost is huge there. Artillery systems is a dark red. That is indeed a record, as you can see over here. So you have average, the mean average, the median average, and a mode of a daily record high, 7-day rolling average, moving average, and a 30-day moving average as well. So the 7-day personnel loss average is 1,270. The 30-day is 1,242. So you can tell that the 7-day average is high. This last 7 days has been a really bad week for the Russians. And the 30-day, certainly bad, because that is almost double the mean average. We have artillery systems 81. The 7-day rolling average is 41.57. So we have seen a bit of up and down there. There was a few days over the last week where it was actually fairly low. But the last couple of days, right back up there. In fact, when we go and look at let's look at the artillery losses, and I know my face might be in the way to some degree, we can see it sort of tails off a little bit there. So we actually have an interesting statistical set of trends here. Hopefully you can see that. In fact, what I'll do is move my stupid face, there you go, up to there again, and we can see that the Ukrainians have had less success with attrition of artillery to quite some significant degree over the last couple of weeks. But today's number is a record breaker, so it's right back up there. So there's something interesting going on there. And this, you can see the trend line, that dotted orange line, dipping right back down. Hopefully the Ukrainians can reverse that, or even better, if they can't reverse it, let's hope it's because they have attrited so much of the Russian artillery that they're struggling to find targets. I doubt that's the case, but hope springs eternal. So anyway, that's a situation with artillery losses. Just a massive number of well, if you look at the, what is it, May onwards, May of this year to September, these losses were huge for the Russians. They lost just phenomenal numbers of artillery pieces. It has been a very tough time for them in that category for sure. When we look at tanks, we can see that it has been another interesting sort of drop off over the last few weeks, well, really few months, you could say. Big losses in February, March time of this year, maybe coinciding there with the attacks that the Russians were throwing onto places like Pokrovsk. That's what this October spike was all about. 55 tanks lost in one day. There's huge losses there when they were just throwing mechanized assaults at Avdiivka. But more recently that has dropped off, and it could indicate that they are struggling to get hold of tanks in any decent enough number. Now, a few days of really heavy losses suggests maybe they've got some new deliveries in, maybe they've been stockpiling ready for some significant assaults. There have been some huge attacks in the Kharkiv and Pokrovsk and Vuhledar areas over the last few days. Then when we go to AFVs, or armoured fighting vehicles, armoured personnel vehicles, depending on how you want to define them, fairly similar as well, sort of dropping a little bit recently, but spiking back up the last couple of days. So the last few days has been certainly more challenging for the Russians than we saw earlier on in the last 7 days. Right now, let's go back to where we were. No Andrew Perpetua lost list again today, so we missed them for a couple of days. I'm sure he'll bring, well, I hope he'll bring them out today. We have an instance of, in fact, that's in the wrong place, so let's take that to the end. Okay, Ukrainian forces apparently using HIMARS to hit a large artillery firing position of the Russian forces in the Kursk region. Have no details of that, but then when you start seeing huge 81 artillery systems lost, a huge number there, then you start piecing these bits of evidence and hearsay together, and you think, yep, okay, the Ukrainians were going on the hunt for artillery pieces possibly, and using HIMARS to take them out shows what a high kind of value these artillery pieces have. In a cross direction, Russian forces attempted to storm Ukrainian positions near the village of Pobyeda for 2 consecutive days, deploying 27 units of equipment and a company of personnel. Ukrainian forces from the 33rd Mechanized Brigade successfully defended their positions, reportedly destroying 16 Russian vehicles and eliminating 60 Russian servicemen. So that then leads into these higher numbers here in terms of tank losses and AFV losses. This is one of several bits of footage that you can see showing destruction of a lot of Russian equipment. We also have more footage coming out of Ukrainian drone-on-drone activity. This is a Lancet drone. This is a loitering munition rather than a reconnaissance drone. But there have been a large number of reconnaissance drones, your Zalas and your Supercans and your Orlan 10s and 30s being taken out in a similar fashion by these, some people say sort of bespoke drones. I don't know what extra capability these drones would have, or whether they are just FPV drones that maybe have extra battery capability on them to get them up high to fly around for some time hunting these other drones out and then just wanging themselves into them. I don't know that's particularly high technological method of taking out these drones. Nonetheless, the Ukrainians are doing a good job there. And actually, when I was on TouchMe last night, that's something I talked about, how that's been a marked difference recently with the Ukrainians putting in a really big effort into taking down these drones, and that of course will then lead to fewer deep strikes on the Ukrainian rear by these missiles that are only able to do that because the reconnaissance drones are doing their intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. Right, big blaze yesterday lunchtime in Rostov region of Russia. The videos from Shakhty. Firefighters say a warehouse and timber left outside caught fire, just like that. After 400 square meters burned, it could be arson. There doesn't seem to be anything war related, but this is the sort of thing that's happening an awful lot. There are just so many fires going on all over Russia. And I will continue to report them because I think it's part of a larger trend that we've been seeing over the course of the war. The Air Force reports that only a small missile and drone attack overnight. 3 out of 4 Shahed drones were shot down. So somewhat lower percentage last night, 75%, but of course only 1 drone getting through. the percentages will be skewed due to the lower number. An additional one landed due to electronic warfare measures. No, I stand corrected. 100% were shot down or intercepted or fell due to electronic warfare. So 2 KH-59 and 69 cruise missiles that were launched did not hit their intended target, so possibly taken out themselves by electronic warfare. We don't know. But good news there for the Ukrainians. A much, much smaller number of weapons sent into Ukraine. So that's good news there. Now, this is not last night. This is actually quite some time ago, 4th to 5th of September 2024. So good, almost 3 weeks ago. But I just thought this was, you know, you can check out the threads that Shahid Tracker does. Really interesting looking at the routes of the drones. But I just wanted to point out one thing, which is that this was a night when 78 drones were sent. And a vast majority of them seem to have been sent from one place up in maybe Bryansk Oblast, maybe Kursk Oblast, could be actually. Yeah, it's looking like Kursk. Yeah, so imagine I assume the Ukrainians are going to be working really hard to isolate, find out exactly where these drones get sent from and then hit them. I mean, this is such a valuable target for the Ukrainians. Imagine hitting this launch site when they've got all of these, maybe, I don't know, 70 drones stacked up, ready to be shot over the border from this one place in Kursk. If you could hit that, oh, that's a gold mine for the Ukrainians. And look at all of these drones being sent over and targeting all these various sites, mainly in the north of the country on that particular day. Though that's 3 weeks ago, I think that tells us, you know, that tells you something, and the Ukrainians are going to be working hard, no doubt, to stop that happening. An overnight strike last night on Zaporizhia injured 16 people, according to the city administration. There were at least 7 airstrikes on the city and the district. 13 high-rise buildings of private houses were damaged. So again, it's this seemingly indiscriminate... Jesus wept. Just come off a picture back to this and it turns the sound on, because that's what it does. That just literally sent fizzles through my brain. I do apologise if I scared you awake, guys. That was the some kind of alarm going off in that video. And of course I know I can mute the tabs. I know I can do that, but then I wouldn't have the joy of having the crap scared out of me by massive noises. At least it wasn't some kind of inappropriate drum and bass music or heavy metal slamming into my ear holes. Nevertheless, what we can see here is that and it's such a horrible topic, I shouldn't make light of it, but yeah, we have civilians either being targeted or certainly being hit due to poor targeting from the Russians. 10 explosions were reported yesterday in Jankoy. So this is yesterday afternoon, Jankoy in Crimea. That's where there's a big airbase. There's also a logistics hub there because of the road and rail networks converging on Jankoy. This is in the sort of north of Crimea. So often we hear of, well, actually so often we probably don't hear of strikes taking place. And there's probably an awful lot that both sides do that. Both sides do that. We don't hear about. Here, Jankoy gets potentially struck, 10 explosions, and there's no video evidence that I'm aware of, so who knows what was hit there, if indeed anything was. And on that note, it's worth mentioning this. So this is, again, like provenance, pinch of salt, all of that. This is a claim from yesterday afternoon that in the meanwhile, I almost missed it, Ukraine also bombed Shaikovka airbase some 270 kilometers southwest of Moscow. Now, I have no knowledge of this. I have no information on this, no evidence that that's taken place, but it could be that an airbase has been targeted as well over the last few nights. Who knows when that was, but Shaikovka might well have been targeted by the Ukrainians, and we don't know about it, or don't know much about it, or enough about it. Euromaidan Press reported yesterday that another debris crash incident might have occurred in Russia. I did sort of report on this. It came out a bit later. An hour ago, a Russian Telegram channel reported that air defense was active when an audible loud explosion between Rostov-on-Don and Azov town took place. Later, another local channel, Eto Rostov Novosti, reported an intense fire in the Azov district. Currently, it is unclear what is or was on fire. So a large explosion there, something happening. Anyway, who knows what that may have been. Okay, in Rostov last night, says Tim White, this is, well, when last night, I don't quite know what it means. It could be 2 nights ago. He said that in the middle of last night. There was one other fire, he says, said to be caused by the downing of a Ukrainian drone. Russia claims only grass burned in the Milorovsky district, but a military airport is in that area. So again, we don't always know whether targets have been struck. Here we have some evidence of fire burning very close to an airport where a drone supposedly has fallen out of the sky and set fire to the grass. Or was that part of a larger attack on the airbase in that area? And then just to, again, talk to the strikes on the Toropets ammunition dump, and then the one 16 kilometers south at Oktyabrski. And then you had the one struck at Tikhoretsk in Rostov Oblast. Well, this is the second one, the second one in the Tver Oblast, ammunition depot near the Oktyabrski settlement, the Tver region, which was attacked by Ukrainian drones the day before yesterday. So not only the arsenal itself was destroyed, but also the trains that brought the ammunition there. So it's a train line that goes through there, and that's how they get their ammunition from A to B. So obviously all of these ammunition depots will have a train line attached to them. Many lives of our people have been saved. So it's not just the ammunition, but the means of getting the ammunition from one place to another being destroyed there. That's potentially very useful for the Ukrainians. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. We're going to go to a Christopher Miller article in the Financial Times. Well, actually, he's usefully summarized that article here. Now, he's been over to Ukraine, spoken to people on the front lines, and this is a fairly gloomy article. But like I said to you before, if you go and speak to people on the front line in certain areas, they're always going to tell you that their life is horrible because they never have enough ammunition. They lose, you are being attrited, you are in war, life sucks, and there will always be complaints. So it's worth understanding the larger context, and by that I mean that you can get these opinions from certain areas of the front line, but you need to zoom out and see what is happening as a whole and understand that their view is going to be seen through a very localized lens. Having said that, there will also be genuine grievances about how things are going for the Ukrainians on the front line that I think are justified. So it is definitely problematic along that Pokrovsk front line all the way down to Vuhledar, where things are going fairly desperately. I'm hoping to do a frontline update today. It's long overdue. Christopher Miller says, quoting, "We see many cauldrons are forming." That means places where people are starting to get encircled. Russian forces are overpowering Ukrainian troops and employing new tactics as they pound their way toward key cities of Pokrovsk, Vuhledar and Kharkiv. My Financial Times dispatch from the eastern battlefields of Donetsk region. Okay, so here we have a useful bullet point list. Commanders attribute the situation in Donetsk to the following factors. 1. Evolving Russian tactics. 2. Dwindling resources. 3. Logistical challenges. 4. Lack of air defense and fortifications. 5. High casualties. 6. Poorly trained conscripts. And 7. Mental and physical exhaustion. So this does not bode well for the Ukrainians. All of those are really challenging situations. Quote, "Kursk was a good idea. It exposed Russia as being weaker than many people believed," said a commander of the Ukrainian Ground Forces unit. "But we are paying the price for it with more of our own land." Now, my comeback to this is that will seem almost certainly it's going to be the natural response for anyone fighting in Pokrovsk, which is, yeah, okay, we did really well. It was really good for PR and everything, and we showed that they were weak up there, but why are we still fighting up there when we are losing ground in Pokrovsk? This is terrible. We are ceding territory because the Russians are pouring more and more effort into this area, and we are concerned with stuff going on up there. So yeah, that was all good. Now let's sort this out. But the reality almost certainly is that a square kilometer of land in Kursk is worth more than a square kilometer of land in Pokrovsk region. It's just that simple. In other words, you will end up losing 10 square kilometers worth of Pokrovsk region just here in a day. And if you keep hold of, or if you gain 5 square kilometers up in Kursk, then that is more valuable. Now, you might think that's unfair fighting down here, but actually as a bargaining chip, Kursk, like area of land in Russia, is much more valuable. You can swap more of that or do more with Kursk as leverage than you can do with a lack of Pokrovsk region land. And that means that the people fighting in Pokrovsk are going to be looking up there and getting really annoyed because they might not understand that rationale. Now, I'm not saying that's definitely correct. This is my speculation, purely speculation. Some random guy sitting in his office on the south coast of the UK, right? Take it for what it is. But it seems prima facie that that would be the case. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that. You know, it's not in the best interest of Ukraine to go, I know, let's do something that's completely insane and totally not worth doing. And let's waste of all our time, effort and resources by attacking up in Kursk. They're going to be making a calculation. And the calculation is that that is more valuable up there than losing this is valuable, or not losing this is valuable down here. That's a calculation they made. So for the people fighting down here, they will not like that. And if they are not getting the resources compared to the people up in Kursk, they're not going to like that as well, which means that they're going to be attrited, they're going to be suffering, and things are not going to be going well as far as they are concerned with the lens they are looking through. Okay, to continue the quote, Vladimir Putin destroyed Wagner, but he took the most effective parts of it, said Mikhailo Tempa, a battery commander from the 21st Battalion, Ukraine's separate presidential brigade. The Russian army, he added, quote, learned lessons and experience from Wagner and are fighting like them. Boulevardier, a drone operator in Tempa's battalion, said the new Russian tactic of using smaller infantry units to attack from several directions at once has made it harder for him to target troops. This is something the Russians have been using for some time. Much smaller units and more of them. So rather than big single waves, a lot of smaller units attacking from different directions and on foot, which means that they are, you know, if you have 20 people packed into a BMP, then you just blow the BMP up, job done. You have 20 people on foot, then that becomes much more difficult because you have to have 20 drones to take them out or similar, you know, especially in the absence of cluster munitions for artillery. Anyway, the Ukrainians can do little about Russian attack helicopters and jets carrying glide bombs. So yet again, I mean, this is the issue. And the reality is that Kursk would have made no difference to this. This is an endemic problem with Ukraine, is that they don't have forward operating air defense systems that have a long enough reach. Realistically, you want to take a massive risk and bring Patriot air defense systems further forward, like we've seen happen previously, but then you end up losing the odd launcher and it becomes a bit controversial. But you need to take out some of these Russian helicopters and fixed wing aircraft from doing this damage. It's not a lack of troops or whatever. Like, you can bring some people down from Kursk and you still have the issue that the Russians are attacking with aviation and dropping countless guided glide bombs on Ukrainian defenses. He said, we have no defenses here as these helicopters and jets carrying glide bombs attack. So that was the deputy commander of Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade, fighting 70 kilometers south of Pokrovsk in Vuhledar. And Vuhledar is a nightmare there. Delays in Western arms deliveries are a factor in the worsening situation for Ukrainian forces, commanders said, but they also laid the blame with Kyiv's leadership for moving too slowly to build defensive lines and then constructing ineffective ones. Now, this is, I think, a genuine complaint that can be levelled irrespective at the Ukrainian hierarchy here. This happened in Avdiivka, where it was kind of like, we're on the attack here, or we're defending and it's sorted here and it's not going to be broken through. So we don't need to build these. Oh, they've broken through. Oh dear. Did we build? No, we didn't. Oh dear. and then they had to hurry to build those defenses as they were retreating, and they weren't in the ideal positions that they should have been in because they were already retreating through those areas, and you had to build with excavators much further back from the contact line. And so you had this situation in large areas of the Donetsk Oblast where the Ukrainians haven't built decent defenses. Now, they have done that in other places like Zaporizhia, and I think possibly up in the northeastern area where you got the Oskil River, there's arguably better defenses up there. But down in Donetsk, that is one of the areas where the Ukrainians have done poorly in building defenses. Yuri, a commander of the 68th Jaeger Brigade, whose troops fought near but ultimately failed to defend the town of Novohradivka, it's quite a large town in the Pokrovsk area that has been lost, said, quote, "We have had a lot of losses. There are more losses than before." He described his unit as in shambles, with wounded soldiers sent to hospitals and psychiatric wards, while the fit ones are being redeployed to different units. Yuri also described Russian chemical weapons attacks on his troops, including one in April when soldiers jumped out their trenches to breathe fresh air, only to be shot. This is what we hear a lot of, dropping tear gas in trenches. You get out because you can't breathe, and then they're waiting for you and shooting you, or dropping IEDs on your head as you get out. Our guys choked on it and panicked, he said. Ukrainian troops had gloomy prognoses for Pokrovsk. Most said something along the lines of what a drone unit already predicted, quote, "Total destruction and likely occupation within 2 to 3 months. Realistically, Pokrovsk will be like Bakhmut." Now, this is where I might say something a little bit controversial, which is, yeah, and that's part of the calculation that the Ukrainians may well have made, which is that we are going to lose Pokrovsk, but it's more important that we gain stuff up in Kursk because, like I said earlier, it is just of more use. Or there's more leverage that you can extract from that Russian land. And indeed, we're hearing that they're not just doing that, they're attacking. Here's another one. Warriors from the 95th Separate Assault Brigade report breaking through a section of the Russian border. The exact location and date were not specified. So now we have potentially other attacks happening north of the Ukrainian border into Russian territory. We've seen a number of places in the Kursk Oblast where the Ukrainians have broken through. And that is, again, that same calculation, which is we'd rather use these troops to do offensive maneuvers to gain land in Kursk than use them as defensive troops to stifle losses in Pokrovsk. That is a calculation. So people in Pokrovsk are not going to be happy with that, and they're going to be questioning the efficacy of doing so. But at least from a prima facie point of view, the Ukrainians have clearly, I think, concluded that those resources are better spent up north. Okay, however, the map doesn't look good. This is Rob Lee showing how the cauldron has been created around Vuhledar, where the Ukrainians are undoubtedly going to have to pull out there pretty darn soon, where you've got more gains being made in the Pokrovsk region. This is south of Seledove. And Ukrainsk there has been lost, but I showed you that myself the other day. And then here up in the New York area, where there's possibly a bit of to and fro there, a bit of blue area, maybe the Ukrainians have taken back. But anyway, Russians filling in some area there and taking more land. So it is not looking great on the Eastern Front, but it's about understanding it in a larger context. Now, another nugget here for you: exclusive footage of 2 commandos from the HUR's Timur Special Unit dropping a Ukrainian flag on Snake Island. So Snake Island is that island out towards Odessa way that the Russians had control of for quite a long time during the war, and then the Ukrainians eventually wrested control back from them. And then they have, I think, almost certainly radar and air defense on there. It has been targeted over the last 6 months or so by the Russians with some missile attacks. But here is a kind of James Bond-esque, and I say that because there's a Sean Connery film with him on a microlight. 2 commandos dressed in shorts and Hawaiian shirts to masquerade as tourists if they were captured or ended up in Romanian waters. So that's interesting. So they were not dressed as soldiers per se, dropped a flag on Snake Island from a gyrocopter. This was immediately after the Russians fled from the island in June 2022. So a bit of a PR exercise there. And I'm going to have to end the video here slightly before I did on the original upload, and that's because the section was talking about a Russian VKS serviceman taking his own life up near Moscow, and it was, I think, flagged up for discussing that, and sometimes that is given a restriction, and it was given an 18 certification by YouTube because of talking about, I guess it could be thought to be talking about ideation to do with taking your own life and whatnot. So I've cut out that bit, even though it wasn't at all that, and it was more to do with the military context of that piece of news happening. So anyway, this is slightly shorter than the other one that you can watch that has that longer ending to it, and you can go and find that on my channel. Take care, speak to you soon, toodle pips.